Top story after 21 days of heated testimony, the defense and the prosecution delivered closing arguments yesterday in Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has a recap for us.
The first trial of an American president soon in the hands of 7 men and 5 women. Prosecutors closing their case arguing former President Trump orchestrated a criminal conspiracy to influence the 2016 election, to pull the wool over voters' eyes, they say, by ordering the payoff of Stormy Daniels and then covering it all up. Prosecutor Joshua Steinglass trying to establish a pattern of Mr. Trump burying damaging stories that could derail his 2016 campaign, pointing to a key conversation secretly recorded by Mr. Trump's then attorney, Michael Cohen, the star prosecution witness, where Mr. Trump discussed an alleged payoff of a different woman, Steinglass calling it jaw-dropping.
So what are we going to pay? Funding, yes. And it's all the stuff.
But much of closings focused on the credibility of Cohen. Quote, "We didn't pick him up at the witness store. The defendant chose Michael Cohen," Steinglass said, acknowledging Cohen's criminal history and admitted lies under oath, but telling jurors, "You don't need Michael Cohen to connect these dots, but as the ultimate insider, he can do just that." The defense has also tried to discredit Cohen as motivated to lie, desperate to put Mr. Trump behind bars, pointing to Cohen's own podcasts.
Revenge is a dish best served cold. And you better believe I want this man to go down and rot inside for what he did to me and my family.
But Steinglass took that head on, arguing Cohen is understandably angry because Mr. Trump dropped him like a hot potato after the feds came calling in 2018, urging jurors to see this case not about Michael Cohen, it's about Donald Trump. In his closing arguments, Trump attorney Todd Blanche tore into the prosecution's case and its reliance on Cohen's testimony, blasting Cohen as the human embodiment of reasonable doubt, branding him the gloat, the greatest liar of all time, and the MVP of liars, saying he lied to Congress, judges, prosecutors, bankers, his family, adding he came in here, raised his right hand, and lied to each of you repeatedly, pointing to one of the trial's most dramatic moments when Cohen was confronted with phone records suggesting he never spoke to Mr. Trump about Daniels in an October 2016 phone call lasting just 96 seconds, but instead had called Mr. Trump's bodyguard to complain about a teenage prank caller. Blanche arguing he told you he spoke to President Trump. That was a lie, and he got caught red-handed. That is perjury. Blanche striking at the heart of the 34 low-level felony counts Mr. Trump faces for allegedly falsifying his business records, arguing none of the invoices, vouchers, or checks were false, saying the legal retainer language on the records wasn't criminal or sinister, but merely generated by accounting software at the Trump Organization, and there was nothing wrong with it. President Trump is innocent, Blanche said. There is no crime, period.
This is not a trial that should happen. It's a very sad day. This is a dark day in America.
NBC's Laura Jarrett reporting for us there. Here is the timeline for today's proceedings. Judge Juan Merchan will give the jury its instructions at 10 o'clock Eastern time. That's expected to last about an hour. After that, jury deliberation begins. The judge says the jury will deliberate until about 4:30 this afternoon. Schedules for Thursday and Friday will depend on the jury's progress. Let's bring in former litigator and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin and former U.S. attorney and MSNBC contributor Chuck Rosenberg. Also with us, of course, the host of Way Too Early, White House bureau chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire. Good morning to you all. So, Lisa, I'll start with you. You were at your post again yesterday down at the courthouse. So the case from Donald Trump's defense team is Michael Cohen, the star witness, as he believes he is a liar, the greatest liar of all time, as Todd Blanche put it, to which the prosecution said he is. And that's exactly why Donald Trump counted on him to do his dirty deeds. How did it play out in court yesterday?
Well, I think one of the things that is missing from that sort of juxtaposition there is how much other evidence the prosecution has that has absolutely nothing to do with Michael Cohen. So if you listen to Todd Blanche yesterday, Michael Cohen is the central character in this drama. If you listen to Josh Steinglass yesterday, he's nothing more than a narrator. He's a tour guide through this mountain of evidence. I thought it played pretty well that he acknowledged what Michael Cohen is and was, because he was saying, Again, you played this clip from Laura. We didn't pick him up at the witness store. We didn't choose this guy. The defendant chose this guy, and he chose him exactly for the characteristics that his lawyers are telling you now makes him quintessentially untrustworthy. And I thought that was a really good moment for Josh Steinglass, who had a number of very good moments yesterday.
So, Chuck, 3 hours. We talked about this ahead of the closing arguments yesterday about just how long a day. Didn't end till 8 o'clock last night. 3 hours from Donald Trump's defense team, and then almost 5 hours from the prosecution. At the end of the day, what did it add up to for you?
At the end of the day, it added up to about 8 hours.
Thanks, Chuck.
Does math, too.
Yeah, he's very good.
I was told there would be math on this test. I was prepared. Look, I think that's too much. But part of that, Willie, is informed by my own experience as a federal prosecutor in a district where if I had begged for 30 minutes to close a case like this, I would have gotten 20. So I don't know what the right amount is. And I know that prosecutors and defense attorneys, want to say everything they can, because if they leave something unsaid, they will believe that was the thing that made the difference in their case. So I get it. I think it's too much, and I think there's a law of diminishing marginal return.
So, Lisa, walk us through what seemed like an important moment in the courtroom yesterday, where Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche, was admonished by the judge, Judge Merchan, because Blanche had sort of said to the jury, look, you might be putting this guy in prison. You might be sending him to jail. The judge said, whoa, 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 like that's not necessarily what's going to happen. Walk us through what happened and why that matters.
So there was an objection to it. It was sustained. The prosecution asked for something called a curative instruction. That's an instruction from the jurors that they're not to take that into consideration. The reason it was so serious is, first of all, Blanche was a very experienced prosecutor. He worked in the Southern District of New York for almost 10 years. As Chuck knows, and even I know, and I was never a prosecutor, you don't mention anything in summations having to do with sentencing. Why? Because that's the province of the judge. The jury has absolutely nothing to do with the sentence. And so by raising the specter of prison, that was a big no-no, particularly given who the defendant is here, because what Blanche was trying to do was think about who you might be sending to prison. This is the former president of the United States, almost trying to elevate the burden improperly. And so the curative instruction was, you're not to think about this. Sentencing is totally for me to deal with. And there's not necessarily a sentence of imprisonment that would go along with a conviction. Andrew Weissman and I were on air together last night, and he said, if you're the prosecution, that's like the best possible position to be in, because he has lifted that extra burden that Todd Blanche wanted to place on the jury by telling them, you know what, you can convict this guy and he might never do a day in prison. Don't trouble yourself about it.
Chuck, I understand from my preeminent source in this trial, Mika Brzezinski, that there are 2 lawyers on the jury. So when I start hearing about, Michael Cohen's a lion, Michael Cohen's this, Michael Cohen's that, and everybody's focusing on Michael Cohen, just as a lawyer, and I know Lisa and you also lawyers, what are you thinking about? When you get back there, you're looking at the documents. And it seems to me that if you've got 2 lawyers that are going to be back there, they're going to be saying, okay, it doesn't matter whether you like that guy or not. It's in the documents. We've got the evidence here, whether that evidence acquits Donald Trump or whether it convicts him. I wonder if that's your thought as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, Joe. Look, if I have a good case, good evidence, good documents, good witnesses, all are welcome to the jury. Lawyers, zoologists, I don't care. And also, you can't look at any one person and describe that they would be or would not be a good juror based on their occupation. But I think you're right. I think lawyers take a particularly rigorous approach to analyzing evidence and following instructions. Again, if I have a good case, that's exactly what I want.
So let's look ahead to today, guys. And Lisa, the jury instructions, 10 o'clock this morning, expected to last about an hour. And then it's in the hands of the jury, this case. Why are the jury instructions so important to what happens next?
Because the jury instructions inform how the jurors understand what are sort of complicated charges here. So remember, the charge here isn't about hush money itself. It's about the falsification of business records, and 34 of them in particular. But what makes this a felony is the accusation that these business records were falsified, essentially in service of concealing another crime. And so in that, the jury instructions are going to be critical. What does it mean to have the intent to defraud, for example? To the extent that the prosecution has alleged that that underlying crime as a conspiracy to promote Donald Trump's election through unlawful means, what are those unlawful means? We know, for example, from yesterday that Judge Merchan's final jury instructions allow for the jurors to have not a meeting of the minds, but their own opinion on what those unlawful means are. And there's sort of a grab bag of what they can be. And so the jury instructions here are absolutely critical. In particular, look for an instruction on what it means to falsify business records with an emphasis on the word cause, because Donald Trump has been accused of either falsifying the records himself or causing them to be falsified. And Josh Steinglass really emphasized yesterday this cause aspect of it. It doesn't matter that Trump may have never seen the invoices or the general ledger entries. If he set this whole thing into motion, he caused Alan Weisselberg to instruct Jeff McConney, to instruct other people to make these business records in a certain way. That will be enough, so long as the jury instructions make clear to the jury that that's how they can find what it means to falsify.
Interesting. By the way, after weeks of watching Republican members of Congress who support Trump showing up at the courthouse, the Biden campaign sent a surrogate of its own to Lower Manhattan yesterday. Actor Robert De Niro, the two-time Oscar winner and New York City resident, showed up shortly after court got underway. He was joined by Biden campaign communications director Michael Tyler, as well as two of the police officers who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, Michael Fanone and Harry Dunn. There, De Niro delivered a message on behalf of the campaign, warning about the dangers of a second Trump administration.
I don't mean to scare you. No, wait, maybe I do mean to scare you. If Trump returns to the White House, you can kiss these freedoms goodbye that we all take for granted. And elections, forget about it. That's over. That's done. If he gets in, I can tell you right now, he will never leave. He will never leave. When Trump ran in 2016, it was like a joke. This buffoon running for president. No, never could happen. We'd forgotten the lessons of history that showed us other clowns who weren't taken seriously until they became vicious dictators. With Trump, we have a second chance. And no one is laughing now. This is the time to stop him by voting him out once and for all. We don't want to wake up after the election saying, what, again? My God, what the hell have we done? We can't have that happen again.
Okay, joining us now, communications director for the Biden-Harris campaign, Michael Tyler, who, as we mentioned, also spoke at the news conference outside the courthouse. I guess I have to ask you why you decided to speak there and to have the campaign show up at the courthouse. I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me at all.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. We showed up there because the news media has been incessantly posted up there day in and day out for weeks. And so, as we said last week, we are going to use the next month to talk about the upcoming presidential debate in Atlanta and the things that Donald Trump is going to have to answer for. First and foremost, he's going to answer for the continued threat that he poses to our democracy, his continued embrace of political violence. And so that's what Robert De Niro and Officers Fanone and Dunn were speaking to down in Manhattan yesterday. They were speaking to the fact that Donald Trump still regularly embraces political violence, is calling for a bloodbath if he loses this election, and is pledging to rule as a dictator on day one. And so, given that the news media is
I get everything that you're saying, Michael. Michael, I get everything you're saying, and I agree with the officers who showed up and with Robert De Niro, but I'm just curious about the location. Last week, when the members of Congress showed up to support Donald Trump, I called it unbecoming of the office. They're serving the people of their district, American citizens, and not supposed to politicize a court proceeding. And I feel the same way about the campaign. Is there any concern about the campaign getting a little bit too close to these court proceedings, and could that backfire? Any concerns? Looking back, was it a good decision?
No, there's no concern. This campaign is not speaking about the substance of the trial in any way, shape, or form. What we are talking about, what we talked about yesterday, and what we'll continue to talk about, is the unique threat that Donald Trump poses to our democracy. And so a lot of the coverage as of late has been focused on the stakes for him, but we're making sure that the American people understand the stakes for them. And that's Donald Trump's potential rise to power if he's able to win this election. This campaign is making sure that he does not. That's why we are engaged and focused on highlighting the stakes, highlighting what he's attempting to do if he's able to regain power, but also highlighting the president's historic record of accomplishment, the positive things that he has done day in and day out for working people across this country. That's what we're doing today in Philadelphia with the launch of Black Voters for Biden, and that's what we'll do day in and day out, making sure that people understand Joe Biden's positive record of accomplishment, his vision for the future, and of course, constantly calling out the danger and the threat that Donald Trump poses to our democracy. That's what we were doing yesterday, and it's what we will continue to do.
Hey, Michael, Jonathan Lemire. Should we expect more of these sort of guerrilla surprise style campaign appearances, whether the courthouse or elsewhere? And secondly, we may be just hours or a day or two away from a verdict in the Trump case. Do you think that's going to matter to voters one way or the other, no matter what the outcome may be?
Well, yeah, listen, I'll take those in order. Look, first and foremost, I think one thing that this campaign understands is that we operate in an increasingly fragmented and fractured media environment. And so when you have one thing like this trial that's taking up a lot of oxygen, you have to be creative. You have to use every tool at your disposal to break through that clutter and communicate your message to the electorate. That's what yesterday was about, and this campaign will continue to be creative in the ways in which we reach the voters where they are right now. As it relates to the verdict, what this campaign is focused on, and what we know to be true, is that there's one way to guarantee that Donald Trump never returns to power, and that's by defeating him at the ballot box. That's what voters did in 2020, and that's what this campaign is charging towards in 2024. And that's why we're constantly reminding people of what the stakes are going to be, because Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee at this point, and so the American electorate in this campaign has to be ready to defeat him at the ballot box.
Michael, two things. One is, as Amika pointed out, many had the questions about using the courthouse to make the statement because a lot of us, I certainly thought about going down with the Central Park Five, but we didn't want to make it look like it was anything other than the evidence. But at the same time, I think that the way the Congress people came in, I don't think you could have held Robert De Niro back any more as passionate as he is about making sure the democracy is sustained, and you couldn't have had a better spokesman. But the second thing, today, as you go to Philadelphia with both the president and vice president, there's been those that have said that the polls show black support declining. And if there was any indication of that not being the case, in my opinion, it was the fiasco in the Bronx last week, where Donald Trump drew a mostly white crowd that he imported and maybe got about 3,000 or 4,000 people, which might fill up the bleachers at Madison Square Garden. But as you target the black vote, and as there's been a real focus on that, many of us, 8 of the civil rights groups that are called the legacy groups, we were guests of the president at the state dinner for Kenya. And it was clear, President Obama, others there, that the president and the campaign is also focusing on reaching out to validators. How important is energizing black voter turnout with this focus today?
Yeah, it's incredibly important. Thank you for the question. That's exactly what today is about. We have both the president and the vice president in Philadelphia directly engaging with black voters in a key city and a key swing state. And that is an effort that we are going to replicate in all of the battleground states today, tomorrow, through the weekend, and throughout the summer. We're focused not only on ramping up our paid advertising investments, but really deepening and scaling our organizing apparatus across the summer, working with partner organizations, tapping into their networks, their grassroots networks, so that we can communicate directly with black voters in their communities. We understand that you cannot show up in September and October and just come ask for votes. You have to earn votes. That's what Joe Biden understands. That's what Kamala Harris understands. And that's the work this campaign is doing. And I think, as you pointed out, that sustained organizing work stands in stark contrast to the outreach efforts, or lack thereof, that we see from the Trump campaign. They seem to think that you can shutter minority outreach centers and meanwhile hawk bootleg sneakers or tout your own mugshot as evidence that black voters should support you as far as their outreach effort goes. We know that that's bogus. We know that black voters know that to be an insult to their intelligence, and the way that you earn their support is by reminding them of what you have done for them, which is what this administration has done. No administration has done more for black voters than this administration, reminding them of the stakes in working to earn their vote. So that's what Philadelphia is about. That's what this entire summer is going to be about for this campaign.
Michael, good morning. As you understand very well, at the end of the day, a lot of the vote come November is going to be on the economy. We all see the numbers. We talk about them every day, about the historically low unemployment, about GDP growth. Even consumer confidence is strong. People feel like in their own lives things are going pretty well. We talked about the Dow crossing 40,000, and yet it is that inflation that hits people when they're paying $8 for a box of cereal that you see show up in some of the polling that said they think Donald Trump would do a better job with the economy than Joe Biden is doing, despite all the data I just laid out. So how do you break through on that key central core issue of this campaign about the economy?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. You do it in a number of ways, right? It takes a relentlessness. That's what a campaign is all about. But you have to remind people of where we came from and where we are going and what the stakes are. We have to remind people of the historic record of accomplishment since this president took office. 15 million jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, the work that the president has done to lower costs for middle-class families, capping the cost of insulin, for example, at $35 for seniors. He's going to cap the cost of insulin for everybody in a second term. The $2,000 annual out-of-pocket cap for seniors on prescription drugs, the continued work that we have to do, but also making sure that people understand that everything Donald Trump is talking about doing would only worsen the gap between the super wealthy and the rest of us. He's talking about reinstating even more tax cuts for the ultra wealthy and corporations. We see him out on the stump promising big oil executives that he'll do whatever the hell they want if they cut checks to his campaign, while he then cuts our Social Security. So we have to make sure that people understand, A, what the record of accomplishment is from the president, the work that he continues to do, but also the damage that Donald Trump would do to middle-class families if he's able to regain power. And so that's what this campaign is going to relentlessly communicate from now until November.
Communications Director for the Biden-Harris campaign, Michael Tyler, thank you very much for being on this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Beautiful live picture of the White House, 7:38 in the morning. President Biden and Vice President Harris together will head to Philadelphia later today for a campaign event at Girard College. The visit comes as Biden and former President Trump are running neck and neck in the Keystone State. And joining us now here live in studio, Democratic Senator of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. Senator, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. So let's start there with the president's visit. Obviously, this is a must-win state for him, as it was last time.
Absolutely.
What would be your advice, as someone who has a strong approval rating in the state of Pennsylvania right now, to the president about what he needs to tell voters there?
Well, I don't have any kinds of advice for him. He's already won in 2020, and he's going to win in this one as well. I fundamentally believe that it's going to be a close race. I've been saying that same conversation since 2016, and it's going to be very. And that's what happened in 2016 that Trump was able to beat. But Biden carried Pennsylvania by 80,000 votes, and now he has a strong record. But it's still going to be close. And for that 8 years, Trump has a strong kinds of position in Pennsylvania. He definitely does. But I don't believe he can win ultimately.
When you talk to your constituents, Senator, right now, What are they telling you? Is it inflation that concerns them most? Is it health care? What are the issues that are top of mind?
Absolutely. I really do think, though, that the main issue is like the personalities. It's like, what do you want? Am I a voter? Do I want that kind of chaos and that kind of just the depravity? Or do you want like a decent president that got us through the pandemic, that has been addressing inflation and now has been addressing wars, both in the Ukraine and in Gaza as well, too? If you really think that Trump is going to make any of those situations better, I mean, that's their choice. But I do believe that enough Pennsylvanians are going to decide that this is our guy, that's my guy. In 2022, people were like, well, I don't know if you can campaign. He's not. I'm like, absolutely. I was proud to campaign with the president. And all these polls now, I'm not really concerned about that. The polls had me that I was going to lose by up to 1 or 2 points, and we won by 5. So I do believe that it's a very close race.
Senator, you have been the strongest, arguably the strongest supporter of Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu of any Democrat. No matter what Prime Minister Netanyahu chooses to do in carrying out the war in Gaza, you support it. Now, clearly, you must understand we're not sitting around the table with the Joint Chiefs of Staff here. But the question is, with the way Netanyahu is waging the war, don't you think it might be the single best recruiting tool for Hamas ever conceived?
Well, I do want to just address that. It's not so much that I'm a supporter of Netanyahu. I follow Israel on that. And that is their democratically elected leader. And that's our key ally. So I'm going to support Israel in that. But to anybody that might be in that situation, it's like, I'm going to lean in on democracy on that situation. I'll absolutely trust and work with somebody like Netanyahu before I would work with Hamas or some of the other places in play there as well, too. And it's a very difficult situation in Gaza. But I do believe that Hamas can be allowed to operate if there's going to be any enduring peace in this situation.
So following up on the war there, we obviously had this strike at a tent camp in Rafah in recent days that killed several dozen civilians. Do you think that crossed some sort of red line? Should the U.S. now change how it supports Israel in terms of conditioning weapons and the like?
Yeah, that tragedy, it's heartbreaking to see that. I saw the pictures. I always review all those kinds of pictures. But it also is the truth about this war. And that's what Hamas, those cowards hide behind civilians. And now it's becoming more and more that there was a dump of munitions there that exploded. That's where Hamas is hiding them. And that added more damage that way as well. So, and I don't understand why if Hamas wants peace, they could have taken that ceasefire deal a couple of weeks ago. Or they could surrender right now if they were concerned about that. But they are all about trying to hang on because there's no connection. There's no connection with the suffering of Palestinians. They don't seem to care how many die or anything. But I do believe Israel does try to minimize that, but it's a very difficult war when they have to wage a war when they have Hamas hiding behind the civilians.
Well, what happened in Rafah was atrocious, but I want to bring you back to your home state since the president and vice president is going there today, particularly around black voters. You had the agricultural subcommittee, and one of the things in the Senate that you've emphasized that has a real disproportionate impact on blacks in your state and nationwide is SNAP. And the fact that there are those that are trying to bring the SNAP programs funding down. Talk about that in your fight to maintain that, because I think that a lot of what this election is going to be, from the president to the Senate down to the House, is on substantive issues. And SNAP is one of them, not because of a stereotype, but because of our economic disadvantages are disproportionately in the black community.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm the chair of the subcommittee for nutrition, and that's where SNAP is. Right. And I was been very clear that if the Republicans try to mess with SNAP or cut that, I mean, I've been inspired by my wife. My wife, Giselle, has been very part in food insecurity there, and I just know that this is a really critical issue, and we can't cut that. And if you're going to go after hungry people, you know, I've said it's like, well, I'm willing to be the Democratic version of Tuberville to jam that up, that farm bill, until we just deliver the critical, and that we're not going to mess with SNAP. It's unconscionable, and it's just very bizarre to even go after hungry people.
Senator, I want to ask you about the bill you've introduced with your colleague, Senator Tina Smith of Wisconsin, a mental health bill, something that you've been very open talking about in your own life. What would this bill do to address mental health crises in this country?
Well, it is just such a red and a blue county situation. And if it may not have touched you personally, mental health, but I almost can guarantee that there's someone that you love, someone that you know, somebody that you work with, anyone. And I never realized that if that my voice or that conversation matters, but people reach out all the time and say, hey, I've helped, and I've went and got help, or even I've perhaps even saved their life. And that's a conversation that I thought originally didn't think that was a big political winner, but I wanted to have that conversation. In fact, I had one with Joe, and he was really gracious. And it's an important conversation that we have to have here and address that on a national level. And I do believe it's very bipartisan, and I think it's a critical issue, especially now. Suicide rate is now all-time high. When we crossed 50,000 Americans took their lives, which has never happened before.
So the awareness is there, thanks in part to you nationally, about mental health, people talking about it more than they ever have. What would this bill then do to address the problem?
Yeah, we should need the resources. We need to get the help. I mean, I was just very, very lucky. I was able to check in Walter Reed, and that's not a lot of Americans can do that. But because that's not possible, what I can do is I'm going to pay it forward, and I'm going to have that conversation, very difficult conversations, mental health, self-harm, and we want to make sure there's more resources and to allow and address the issues that make it more difficult for some people, particularly those in rural parts of our nation. It's difficult to get help.
All right. Democratic Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. It's called the United States Senate Commission on Mental Health Act of 2024. We appreciate you being here this morning. Thank you.
No, thanks for having me.
Hey, that is country music star Darius Rucker performing the hit song Wagon Wheel. Now the three-time Grammy winner is out with a new book titled Life's Too Short, a memoir, documenting his massive, fast rise in the music world and all the hardships that came along with it. And Darius joins us now. You know, Darius, it's still kind of strange to say country star because, you know, we all grew up with the Hootie. And what I love in this book is you talking about how everybody said, no, you can't do that. You can't do. It kind of rips a page out of Ray Charles's life when he went to studio execs and said, I'm going to do a country album. But you did, and everybody's like, oh, yeah. Now they're going, oh, yeah, what a great idea. Of course. But it wasn't that way at the beginning, was it?
It wasn't. At every turn, there was everybody from every side telling me it's never going to work. I shouldn't do it. Actually telling me it's going to ruin my career. But I just wanted to do it. I thought we had the songs and the music, so I thought, let's try.
I want to talk about your massive rise. You know, when it seemed like one day you weren't there, and the next day you sold 25 million albums. Now, as a young guy, you go, man, that's really cool. I'd love to do that. As an older guy now, me as a parent, I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of incoming for a kid. And I would not wish that on any of my children. Talk about just how dizzying that was.
Oh, it was crazy. We were going along playing our shows, and then when Letterman happened, it just turned into this big thing. We were selling 500,000 records a week. It was the good thing for us. We had the four of us, and we're real good friends, and we kept each other grounded. But like you said, all the money coming in and all that stuff. It was crazy. That's the only word I could use. It was crazy.
Yeah, you said you did Letterman on a Friday night, right? By Monday morning, everything was different.
And it was really that different. We did Letterman on a Friday, and Monday our lives was totally different.
What I love about this book, and you write so much about your late mother, the title of your last album that we had a great conversation about a few months back, Carolyn's Boy. She passed away well before any of this, but she, it seems to me, is with you on almost every song you sing.
Oh, absolutely. Everything I do was to make her proud. Everything I do in my life is because she was such a great person, and she was always in my corner. You know, growing up this black kid in Charleston and listening to the country and rock and roll, and my friends and my brothers and sisters giving me a hard time, and she would always stand up and tell them, let that boy listen to whatever he wants to listen to. And if she didn't do that, I don't think I would be here.
And she would sing, right? She was in
her
the
voice
kitchen.
was much better than mine. Her voice, she had this amazing voice. I would just sit and listen to her sing.
Yeah, so Joe talked about this crossover into country music that happened, I guess, 16 years ago or something like that. Was she with you when you made that decision? Because that took some strength. I mean, we talked about, there were people who were not subtle about why you shouldn't join country music. You had people at radio stations saying they're just not going to listen to a black artist.
Absolutely. That was the thing that shocked me when I first started going to radio stations, when people said that to my face, you know, and I was like, wow, well, play the song, let's see what happens. And they did, and, we proved them wrong.
Darius, how did you navigate as a black going into country music, obviously successful, but then having to deal with audiences that really, because the barrier that was perceived to be there, somehow when Ray Charles and others did, it wasn't there. Whites that you would think were anti-blacks would enjoy the music. I remember, I was close with James Brown. He's like a father to me. I never saw him more excited than when he was invited to the Grand Ole Opry, which didn't make sense to me until it did.
Yes.
Talk about race and how you found yourself.
That was the thing that I saw. The gatekeepers were the people saying it's not going to work. It wasn't the people listening to the music, because as soon as we started playing, the crowds were there, and it was there. And one thing with the racism, I said to myself early on, which you'll understand, I said to myself, no matter what I go through, Charlie Pride went through tons more than it's ever going to happen to me, and I can put up with whatever came, and that was my attitude. And I just went and I tried to make great music, so it would just be, you can't argue it, you got to play the song.
So you're about to hit the road, 50 cities?
50 cities with Hootie, yeah.
Now, country.
No, this is the Hootie.
Okay,
We're doing
all
Hootie
right.
this summer, yeah.
So
absolutely.
What happens, 50 cities? How long a period of time are you going to do 50 cities?
We start tomorrow. We'll go through October. And for us, we don't play very often, and this is probably the last time we're going to do this. So we decided to make it a really big tour and just play all over.
Stones are still on the road.
I know.
Yeah,
I'll keep playing, but I don't know if we're going to keep.
30 years to go by the Stones standard.
Yeah, I don't know about that, man. If I look like Mick when I'm that old, I'll be out there.
So before you hit the road, tell us a little bit more about the book. What inspired you to do this now, and beyond, of course, the tribute to your mother? What else should we just be looking for?
For me, I always said I was going to write it when my kids were adults, and they're adults now, and Harper came to me and it just seemed like the right time, and I just wanted to tell my story because I just feel like I'm one of the guys who, there's only a couple guys that have done this, me and Charlie Pride until now, when we used to see Beyonce and Willie Jones and Warren Treaty and all these guys getting it, but it was just a story I wanted to tell because it was just a rise from a poor kid in Charleston, South Carolina to, I'm on Morning Joe today.
Joe, the book is great, and we have to point out the three of us have exercised great restraint by not yet talking about SEC football. I know that's where all the three of us would like to go.
Absolutely.
It is tough, but that segue is great for the South because, Darius, I'm just going to say this as a Southerner. Somebody from the North may not get it, but in the South, it's crazy. We grow up in this hodgepodge of R&B and soul and gospel and country, and it weirdly blends together. And most Southerners you go to, they can go from gospel to R&B to rock and roll to country just like that. Talk about how growing up in the South made this so much more seamless for you.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Music in the South is linear. I mean, it's not really a genre. Everybody just listens to everything. And for me, growing up, hearing everything, from hearing the Grand Ole Opry and hearing, the Stones and hearing Al Green, who was my idol, it was just all just music to us. And that's just how it always was for me and all my friends.
Importantly, Darius, when is the Columbia stop on the tour?
I think it's in September.
It's during football season.
It is during football season? It's absolutely during football season. I'm looking forward to that.
I knew it would be. It's so great to see you, Darius. Congratulations on the book. It's titled Life's Too Short, a Memoir, on sale now. Author, Grammy Award-winning musician, the great Darius Rucker. Thanks again, Darius. We'll start with you here and let you set the scene for us, what we expect in the next 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, good morning, Willie. Former President Trump is actively on his way here to Lower Manhattan, making his way southbound the 3.5 miles from Trump Tower. Today is the day that the jury could decide on whether he is guilty or acquitted on the 34 felony counts for the falsification of business records. After 5 weeks of testimony, this trial is nearing its end. Yesterday, the prosecution delivering closing arguments for 4 hours and 40 minutes, well into the night after the 8 p.m. Eastern hour. The defense for Donald Trump, its part, 3 hours of closing arguments. It was a long day for this jury. They are actively here reconvening now inside of this courthouse at 10 a.m. Eastern time, just a little over 20 minutes from now. The court will formally reconvene. Jury instructions will be delivered by Judge Merchan to these 12 jurors who are going to decide Donald Trump's fate. It could well take them hours. It could take them days. It could take them into next week. To note, Donald Trump is already, through this trial, cast doubts about the ability of this juror to make a fair and impartial decision. Don Jr., his son, was out here yesterday as well, suggesting the exact same thing. But when we are awaiting this verdict to come from this jury, I think it's important context for folks to go back to 6 weeks ago. During the jury selection process, Donald Trump's attorneys, as well as the prosecutors for the district attorney's office, each had the ability to challenge for cause each of the jurors before they were seated. And of those 12 jurors who were seated and impaneled by Judge Merchan, the defense for Donald Trump only challenged for cause one of those individuals. So 11 of the 12, they were not challenged by this defense team that is going to be the one as soon as here this afternoon to determine Donald Trump's fate on these 34 felony accounts. Willie?
All right, Vaughn Hilliard outside the courthouse. We'll check back in with you shortly as things begin to develop inside the courtroom.
And go back to the courthouse in New York City where the criminal hush money trial, I guess the judge's directions for the jury about to begin. Donald Trump has walked into the courthouse. What's the very latest, Vaughn?
Yeah, Mika, Donald Trump is now here in Lower Manhattan after making that 3.5-hour motorcade drive from Midtown's Trump Tower. For him, a few minutes from now, he is going to be hearing, along with those 12 jurors, the jury instructions. We expect that process to take about an hour. At that point, the jury will then go back and begin their deliberations, where they will be talking about the specifics of this case amongst each other for the first time. They have 34 felony counts that they will work through. At that point in time, Donald Trump will hold in a different side room inside of this courthouse, where he will remain until the jury comes with its verdict. The court will be in session until 4:30 p.m. Eastern today, so there is a chance that this verdict could come as soon as this afternoon. For his part, on his motorcade ride here, Donald Trump posted on his social media account the following, quote, "The DA's office was allowed to go on with 5 hours of bull ... yesterday. I have no rights against this crooked judge's gag order." Of course, those 5 hours from the prosecution were their closing arguments. His own defense team had 3 hours to deliver theirs. And for Donald Trump's part, he made the active decision not to testify in his own defense in this case. The jury could make their verdict as soon as today.
Vaughn, thank you. We'll be back to you shortly. Danny will give you the last word this morning at the end of our coverage as we turn it over here shortly. The beginning, jury deliberation, and then what could be days potentially of their deliberation.
Now we begin the astrology portion of this trial, where we all sit around and guess at what 12 strangers are thinking in a locked room, with the only hints coming from the little flags that they send out in the form of jury notes, which we will wonder about the meaning of each of those. All of us truly knowing nothing until the final verdict comes in.
We sit and we wait, and the fate of a former president of the United States now about to be in the hands of the jury. Danny, thank you. Ana Cabrera, Jose Diaz-Balart, pick up the coverage after a quick final break.
Welcome back. Mental health-related leaves of absences in the workplace are surging, and it turns out the increase is largely being driven by women. That's according to new research from the mental health service provider ComPsych. The company found that mental health-related absences were up 300% between the years of 2017 and 2023. And get this, up 33% in 2023 alone. Here to discuss, editor of Forbes Women, Maggie McGrath, and MSNBC contributor Huma Abedin. She's vice chair of the Forbes and Know Your Value 3050 Summit. So, Maggie, you're covering this for Forbes. What's going on?
There are so many factors at play here, Mika, and we know from conversations, not just with sources, but with our friends and families, that women are feeling stressed, overwhelmed, unsupported, and in some cases, not understood by the people around them at work and at home. The American Psychological Association found that women are more likely than men to report feeling stressed and are more likely to report stress levels 8 out of 10 out of 10. Meanwhile, we know from the McKinsey Women in the Workplace report that women are more likely than men to be belittled, demeaned, or dismissed at work, otherwise known as microaggressions. And women who experience this type of treatment are 3 times more likely than those who don't to consider quitting their jobs. So you really have a perfect storm here. And I would note that Lindsay Kohler covered this story for us at Forbes Women, and she says that women are perhaps considering leaves of absence more so than quitting because they're looking for support and resources.
Right. So, Huma, the research found that anxiety has overtaken depression as the top mental health concern. Are you surprised? What are you hearing?
You know, I'm not surprised. And just anecdotally, I think about the last couple of years, the number of conversations I've had in the office, in lunches, at dinners with other female professional friends talking about their levels of anxiety, their daughters' levels of anxiety. And when you look at the top 5 mental health concerns that came out of this report, the top being anxiety, the second being stress, relationships coming in third, general psychological issues, and depression being the 5th, I think the reality is they're all interconnected. And one of the interesting things the mental health expert, Dr. Chaffetz, who runs ComPsych, said is that oftentimes, you know, relationship issues are always high on women's concern list, and maybe the underlying issues are actually anxiety and depression. But Maggie and I were just talking about this just before we got on. 300% is a high number. But it's also, you have to look on the bright side of it, it's a more socially acceptable conversation. We're able to talk about these things today, which I think is a good thing that we weren't really comfortable talking about in the past.
Absolutely. At Know Your Value, I talk to women about the big ask because it's not just about negotiating salaries or negotiating a job. It's about getting that line of communication going, building that relationship, if it's possible, so that when you do have an ask, it feels natural, whether it's flexibility or time off or different hours. Those are some of the things that we need to learn to ask for so that we can achieve longevity as well as success in the workplace. So, Huma, what more can we be doing from a company and a policy perspective to improve mental health, the conditions, particularly for women at work?
Well, just the fact that you had Senator Fetterman talking about a mental health commission earlier on Morning Joe, having policymakers talking, normalizing a conversation around mental health is really important. But in terms of a company perspective, managerial perspective, there are some key sort of simple things that we can do to improve the environment for people who work for us. Number one is not overloading our teams. This idea of unsustainable workloads, resourcing teams properly is really important. I am a victim of that. I do it to myself, and I feel like I do it to people I work with. I think showing your vulnerable side is another thing that came out in this study is really important as leaders. Having your aha moment. Mika, I know you've had your aha moment. I remember reading Arianna Huffington's book over a decade ago where she fell and hit her head, and that is what was her aha moment to say, I need some mental health support. I am overworked. I'm exhausted. How do we do a reset? And I think that helps, employees see when their leadership has those issues, which leads to normalizing talking about mental health. The third thing on the list. And finally, and Maggie, Mika, you do this for Maggie and me in our Know Your Value work, which is what is the culture of empathy in our workplace? How is this person doing? How many Zooms do the 3 of us do? And then you'll text us afterwards. Is Aaliyah doing okay? Is so-and-so doing okay? And I just think having that environment, I have a colleague who gives their staff Mental Health Fridays great. Finding sort of that culture, professional culture, I think is really important. And, you know, you're showing us that leadership, and I think plenty of women are doing the same thing today.
Well, I appreciate that. And Maggie, while we're at it, we're currently looking for amazing women to nominate themselves for the 4th annual 50 over 50 U.S. list. And today we have an exciting, and you can nominate someone else as well. I'm just all about self-advocation. But you have an exciting announcement, Maggie. Tell our viewers about it.
Yes, we have seen so much enthusiasm around this list, so I am thrilled to report that today, thanks to popular demand, we are extending the nominations deadline by 1 week to June 7th. It was originally a day from now, but you have an extra week. So please tell us about yourself. Tell us about a woman you admire who is creating her greatest professional impact over the age of 50. You have until 11:59 p.m. Eastern on June 7th. Head to Forbes.com or Know Your Value to nominate yourself.
All right. Thank you so much. For more information, of course, go to those websites. Maggie McGrath, Huma Abedin. Always great to have the team together, and we'll see you again soon.